Welcome to Lesson 10.4, Graphing Nonlinear Equations. Today we're going to talk about how to graph nonlinear relationships, identifying x squared graphs, identifying negative x squared graphs, identifying absolute value graphs, and identifying the opposite of absolute value graphs. So first we need to know what a nonlinear equation is. A nonlinear equation is an equation whose graph is not a line. So you had linear equations that had a graph of a straight line, and a nonlinear equation is a graph that's going to have anything that's V-shaped, U-shaped, anything that's not a line. So it could go up and down, it could zigzag. If it's not a line, it is nonlinear. Alright, so first we have the opposite of x squared. So when you do this, we take and put the opposite of negative 3 squared. So negative 3 squared is 9, but we want the opposite of that, which is negative 9. So if our input is negative 3, our output is negative 9. Our ordered pair is negative 3, negative 9. Again, we have the opposite of negative 2 squared. First, we have to do negative 2 squared. Negative 2 times negative 2 is going to give you a positive 4. But we want the opposite of positive 4 because we haven't used this one yet, which gives you negative 4. So if our input is negative 2, then our output is negative 4. The opposite of negative 1 squared is equal to the opposite of 1, which is equal to negative 1. Alright, so I want you to go ahead and pause the video and try the next 4 on your own. When you come back, we'll go over your answers. Alright, so in this case we have the opposite of 0 squared, which is the opposite of 0, which is 0. 0 doesn't have an opposite because it is neither positive nor negative. So we could have just foregone all of this and just said that the answer was going to be 0. So our point is 0, 0. The opposite of 1 squared is equal to the opposite of 1, which is equal to negative 1. So we have an input of 1 and an output of negative 1. So this is where you can start to see that your equation is nonlinear because you got the same output for a different input. Okay, so whenever you see your outputs repeating, you automatically know that this is a nonlinear equation. And here we have the opposite of 2 squared, which is equal to the opposite of 2, which is equal to negative 2. I'm sorry, that should be 4. So your ordered pair is negative 2, negative 4. There we go. And then the opposite of 3 squared is equal to the opposite of 9, which is equal to negative 9. So your ordered pair is 3, negative 9. So now let's take a look at what this graph looks like when we actually put it on the graph. So the first one we'll start with is 0, 0. Okay, then if you go back and look, we had negative 3, negative 9. So negative 3, 1, 2, 3, negative 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then we had negative 2, negative 4, so negative 1, negative 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we had negative 1, negative 1. And the next one we had was 1, positive 1, or negative 1. 2, negative 4, so 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then positive 3, negative 9. Now you'll notice that your answers came out to be the same, even though your inputs were different. And so it gave you this curved graph here, and the line or the dots all lined up across from one another. This is what your graph will look like when you have an x squared problem. You will have this U-shaped graph, and if it's a positive squared, the U will be pointing upwards. If it's negative, it'll be pointing downwards. If you add to it at all, it will move up and down the x-axis, and it can move up and down the y-axis, but the shape will always stay the same. Alright, the next one, you have the absolute value of x minus 2. So in this case, you have the absolute value of negative 3 minus 2. The absolute value of negative 3 is 3. So 3 minus 2 is 1. So your output is 1. So your x and y are negative 3, 1. Thank you. Right, so now if you put in negative 2, you have the absolute value of negative 2 minus 2. The absolute value of negative 2 is 2. 2 minus 2 is 0. So your ordered pair is negative 2, 0. I'd like you to solve negative 1 through 3, and when you come back, we'll check your answers. Alright, so if you have negative 1 plugged in, you get a negative 1 as your output, because negative 1 minus 2, or positive 1 minus 2 is negative 1. If you plug in 0, you get 0 minus 2, which is negative 2. So you get an ordered pair of 0, negative 2. For the input of 1, you get negative 1. Again, you're still getting that same output, even though you had a different input. If you have absolute value of 2 minus 2, you get 0, so you get an output of 2, 0. And if you put in 3, the absolute value of 3 is 3, minus 2 is 1. So you get the ordered pair 3, 1. Again, you'll see that your outputs repeat even though your inputs are never the same. So in this case, you're going to have a graph that looks kind of similar, but because we subtracted from that absolute value, it's going to shift a little bit. Right, so the first one we had was negative 3, 1. Okay, and then the next ordered pair that we had was negative 2, 0. So negative 2, and then we don't move off of that x-axis. The next ordered pair that we had was negative 1, negative 1. So negative 1, negative 1. And then the ordered pair after that was 0, negative 2. After that, you had 1, negative 1. And then 2, 0. And then 3, 1, 2, 3, positive 1. Again, if you connect your dots, you'll see that you get, this time, a V shape. Anytime that you have an absolute value graph, it is going to be a V shape like this. If it ends up coming out as a negative absolute value, it will be pointing or opening downwards. If it is a positive absolute value, it is opening upwards. Notice we don't start at the origin here. The reason this dropped down to is because I was always subtracting 2 from that x value. So anytime that we subtract from that x value, your graph is going to move down, or if we add, it's going to move up. So the important things to take from this, when it has an x squared in it, your graph is going to be a U shape, and if it's a negative x squared, it's going to be an upside down U shape. If it's an absolute value, it will be a V shape, and if it's a negative absolute value, it will be an upside down V shape. So what I would like you to do for tonight, you have this problem in your notes. I want you to solve, and then I would like you to graph the points in your notes. Okay. What you're going to have to do here is use a different color to show this graph. So here it says draw me in green, here it says draw me in blue. So the green one, I want you to post all of your ordered pairs on Edmodo. So you only need to post the ordered pair. You do not need to post a number along with it, but the ordered pair does need to be in the parentheses. So for example, if you were to post the answers on here, what I would see would be all of these answers that you have in this column. So I would see all of this right here. Right, and then I also would like you to do the graph. I will check your graph in class tomorrow. If you have any questions, please make sure to post them to Edmodo or write them down so we can go over them in class tomorrow.